Our next sort of topic as we're talking about homeostasis is about how chemicals are used to regulate living organisms, how they're used to help maintain homeostasis. And we're focusing on humans. And so the way they do that is through the use of the system that we call the endocrine system. The endocrine system consists of glands in our body, special organs that produce hormones that circulate throughout our blood. And so we have to know a little bit about hormones to start off. Like, what exactly is it? How does it work? So to define this term hormone, it's a protein. So hormones are made out of proteins, and they're made in these special glands, endocrine glands. Thanks, Mary. You're going to tell me I'm not sharing my screen, right? Thanks. At least you didn't let me go on for too long before telling me. Thanks. So our endocrine glands produce these hormones, and they travel through our blood, and they have an effect on a specific part of our body, a specific what we call a target tissue in another area. Can anyone name an endocrine gland? Like if I ask you, what's a gland in our body that produces hormones? Anybody have an idea? Estrogen is a hormone. So Francesca said estrogen, which is a hormone. Right? It's in all of our bodies, both males and females. What's the main endocrine gland that produces estrogen in a female body? What organ produces estrogen? Anyone? Close. It is a reproductive organ. It's the ovaries. Ovaries produce estrogen. Okay. How about another endocrine gland? Does anyone look? Mary?
The pituitary.
That's an endocrine gland, the pituitary gland. Yep. It produces a whole bunch of hormones, actually. We'll look at those in a minute. The adrenal glands, the thyroid gland, testes in males. These are all various glands within our body, and they each produce different hormones that circulate through our blood. Now, as always, we've said this with enzymes too. The important thing about a protein that allows it to work is it's what? Got to know this connection. Proteins are able to do their job because of their length. What word fills that in? We have to know this. What allowed the enzyme to work? Well, an enzyme is another protein. All proteins work because of their, what is, Zoom people, I'm looking at you too. Why do proteins work? Why do enzymes work? Why do hormones work? There's something about them. Is it their color? No, it's their, Mary, just say it, please, save me.
Shape.
It is their shape. The shape of the protein fits in enzymes that fits with their substrate. In these hormones, the shape of the hormone fits in with another molecule called a receptor molecule. So look at this diagram in the lower left. This is important. Because right now, floating around your body, right now in your blood is, let's say insulin as an example. Right? It's floating all throughout your body, but it's not doing anything to the cells in your brain. It's not doing anything to cells in your lungs. It's actually only affecting specific cells in your body, even though it's getting to every cell. And the reason it's able to do that is because cells, for example, in your liver, have a special receptor molecule that matches up with insulin. And when insulin matches up with this receptor molecule, it causes something to happen. And that's what's being shown in these two diagrams on the bottom, right? That Look at this one. So this is a cell in your body producing this blue dot hormone. It's going to all of your cells, okay? It's only going to affect cells which have the correct receptor molecule. If a cell doesn't have it, it's just going to not affect it at all because the shapes aren't going to match up. We see the same thing here, okay, in this diagram. So we have two hormones, hormone A and hormone B. Look at the diagram. Hormone A, is it going to have any effect on this cell? This is hormone A. Not going to affect the cell because this cell doesn't have any receptor molecules that match up with it. Is it going to affect this cell? Yeah, because again, this has a receptor molecule that matches up. So it's important to understand that connection between shape of the hormone, the shape of the receptor molecule, and this is why hormones are specific. They only act on certain organs in our body, just like enzymes are specific because of their shape. In our body, hormones regulate our metabolism, how we use energy. They regulate homeostasis. They regulate our growth. They regulate maturity. They regulate the reproductive cycle. They regulate many things. And so understanding these hormones is important. Also, there are many diseases that are caused by problems with these hormones or with these endocrine organs. Now, they take a little while to work, right? Because if an organ produces a hormone, for it to actually work, it needs to circulate throughout your body, get to the cells it's going to, and have its effect. So sometimes this action of the endocrine system is slower than the nervous system. Okay. So there's different types of hormones. The kind we were just talking about is a non-steroid hormone. Again, you see here's the hormone. You can see it's attaching to a receptor protein, and that receptor protein then causes some stuff to happen in the cell. There are other hormones, however, they actually go into the cell. They can pass through the cell membrane, and they attach to a receptor protein inside the cell. They work a little bit differently. Now, these hormones typically work through a system of feedback. Okay? Feedback is how our bodies maintain homeostasis. And in the endocrine system, the levels of one hormone are monitored and constantly adjusted. So as an example here, you don't need to worry about the actual hormones here in this slide, but for example, the pituitary gland is a gland that's in our brain. It's right at the base of our brain, way inside of our head. It's a really important gland. It controls many of the other endocrine glands. One of the hormones that the pituitary gland produces is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. When this hormone gets to our thyroid gland, it tells it release some thyroxine. But as the level of thyroxine increases in our blood, our pituitary gland monitors it, and if the level gets too high, it shuts off the thyroxine production. So it's kind of monitoring conditions and making adjustments so that conditions stay relatively stable. A really good example of understanding to understand how hormones and feedback work is through thinking about blood glucose levels. So what do you know about blood glucose levels? When are blood glucose levels high? How would you get a lot of sugar, John? Yeah, so if you eat a food high in sugar and digest it, you get a spike in glucose in your blood. That makes sense. It's kind of common sense. Okay. But here's the thing. Too much glucose in our blood can be dangerous. It can lead to nerve damage. It's bad for our kidneys. Okay. So our body has a way of keeping it at the right level, of maintaining homeostasis. How does our body do that? How does our body maintain our blood glucose levels? I'm sure you've heard of some of this. You eat a big meal that has a ton of sugar, your blood glucose levels spiking. How does your body respond to keep you healthy? Produces a hormone. Do you know which one? Insulin. Yeah. Your body responds by producing insulin. Your pancreas is the organ, the endocrine organ that produces insulin. And what does insulin do to your blood sugar? Nope, just one. It brings it down. Right? You just ate a bunch of sugar. It's in your blood. Your blood glucose level is high. Your pancreas realizes this. It's monitoring your blood glucose. It says, whoa, hold on. Too much sugar in the blood. Releases insulin, which goes to cells throughout your body, causes your cells then, when they get the message from insulin, they say, okay, they take in that blood glucose and bring it into the cell. And then the blood glucose level in your blood decreases. So insulin's helping your body maintain homeostasis by reducing your blood glucose level when it gets too high. But, so once your blood glucose level comes back down, your pancreas notices. And what does it do? Once your blood glucose gets back to the normal level, it says, okay, we're good, turns off insulin production so that your blood glucose level stays at that proper level. There's another hormone that does the opposite. For example, if you don't eat for a long time and your blood sugar level's dropping and you're feeling like lightheaded, you don't have no energy, your pancreas is monitoring that as well. It says, okay, wait a minute. Again, our blood glucose level is not correct. It's too low. It produces a different hormone called glucagon. Glucagon goes into your blood, circulates around your body. Glucagon tells your cells, hey, I need some more blood sugar. And so your cells then release it into your blood and your blood sugar level comes back up. Once your pancreas notices that, what does it do? Stops it, and then you're back at the right level again. So you have these two hormones, one bringing your blood sugar down, one bringing low blood sugar up, maintaining the proper level, maintaining homeostasis in your body. And it's your pancreas and these hormones that do that. Here we can see that, this just shows us your blood glucose level, just like we talked about your body temperature, your blood glucose level isn't like a flat line, right? You eat a meal, you drink an energy drink, you have a Kit Kat from your Halloween candy, and then your blood glucose level goes up. But then your pancreas monitors and brings it back down. Or you don't eat for a while, and then the opposite happens. So there is this fluctuation, this natural up and down, but if we're healthy, it's staying around the proper level. If it gets too high, it comes down. If it gets too low, it goes back up. But that doesn't, so some people have a disease in which it doesn't work properly. What's it called? Diabetes. So probably you may know somebody that's diabetic, right? It's a fairly common illness, diabetes. So can you explain? So can anyone explain what diabetes is, or like what effects it has? Okay. Okay. Mary, what were you going to say?
I was gonna say you can't produce your own insulin.
Okay. Yeah, some people, for some reason, cells in their pancreas malfunction and they don't produce insulin. And so when a person has diabetes, like how do they deal with that? Anybody want to give me an idea about what a person has to do, Francis? Yeah, what shots of what? Yeah, they have actually insulin. Their pancreas isn't producing it in their body, so they have to give themselves insulin. So Francis said shots. Some people give themselves an injection with insulin. Does anyone know the other? How else do some people get insulin into their body? Not for insulin. What were you going to say, Jenna? Okay. There's an insulin pump. Sometimes the person that's diabetic might wear a little device, has a small tube that goes in a patch on their skin, and it gives them insulin that way. There are insulin inhalers, okay, where a person can take insulin via inhaler. There's different ways of getting that insulin in your body. What else do people with diabetes have to do? How do they know how much insulin or when to give themselves insulin? Yeah, they have to monitor what? Yeah, they have to monitor their own blood sugar. Their pancreas isn't doing it. So they need to keep track of their own blood sugar. How do they do that? How do they keep track of their blood sugar? No one knows? If you have a diabetic friend or a family member, you've seen them do this many times a day, probably multiple times a day. How? What? Well, they could eat something. Well, hold on. We'll get to that in a second, Francis. They do a blood test, right? They have a little finger prick thing, put a drop on a little test strip, and they can put it into a little machine. It tells them their blood sugar level. And if their blood sugar is too high, they would give themselves insulin. And what if their blood sugar is too low, Francis? What were you just talking about? Yeah, sometimes they might carry something with them, juice or some sort of candy that has sugar in it. So if they feel their blood sugar level dropping or test and they see it's dropping, they can eat that food and get some glucose back into their blood. Again, so they're have to take the place of their pancreas and actually go about and monitor it, give themselves insulin, give themselves glucose to keep their level at the rate at maintaining homeostasis. I mean, it's probably not too far off when we're going to be able to have an artificial pancreas. Like an insulin pump that people wear that have diabetes, it can monitor their blood glucose levels. They have to actually set it to give themselves insulin, but it's probably not too far off till it's going to be automatic. Like this device is going to monitor your blood glucose level and just automatically give you insulin when necessary. We don't quite have that yet, but we're close to having that. But again, this diabetes is a disease of the endocrine system because the pancreas and these hormones are not functioning properly. There's other malfunctions as well. Common ones have to do with the thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland is this gland in your neck. It looks like a bow tie, actually. It's right along your neck, and it produces hormones that basically regulate your metabolism. So some people have their thyroid gland is underactive. It's not producing enough of this thyroxine hormone, okay? And so their metabolic rate is pretty low. Their heart rate is low. They might have a tendency to gain weight very easily because this hormone is not keeping their metabolism going to burn calories. Sometimes when a person has this, their thyroid gland starts to swell up. Okay? This is a person with a huge goiter. It's their thyroid gland, which is swollen up because it's not working properly. It also can happen when a person, what's that? No, people can live with this huge goiter. They sometimes will do surgery on the thyroid gland. Sometimes people be treated with like, probably. Sometimes hormones are used to treat this. The opposite is also sometimes happens. This is when the thyroid gland produces too much of the hormone, and a person's metabolism is really fast, and their heart rate is fast, and They sometimes have this characteristic bulging eye look. They can't keep weight on because their metabolism is so fast, because their thyroid gland's producing too much of this hormone. Sometimes they might take out part of their thyroid to reduce levels, or might radioactively damage some of it to bring their thyroid levels down. Okay, and so you see some examples of that. This would be a person with hyperthyroidism. Again, these are kind of the tools. This is a glucose monitor. You put a tiny drop of blood on a strip and you put it in here, and then the person gives themselves insulin if they have diabetes. There's also some common or somewhat common diseases of the pituitary gland. One thing the pituitary gland produces is growth hormone. Human growth hormone is important. It's important for you guys right now, probably, in that as your body grows from childhood to adulthood. One of the reasons that you grow taller is because of this hormone, human growth hormone. It's a signal. It's produced in your pituitary gland, which is near your brain, inside your head, like we talked about. When your pituitary gland produces this growth hormone, it sends a signal to your bones, telling them to grow longer. And so this is why you grow. And if your pituitary gland is working properly, it sends this growth hormone at certain times in your childhood when you might have growth spurts and things like that. Eventually, as you get to adulthood, it kind of stops sending those signals so much, and you maintain your established height. You stop growing at some point. But there are sometimes people have diseases of their pituitary gland. Sometimes it doesn't produce enough growth hormone. That could lead to dwarfism. Okay. Again, if that gland is not producing human growth hormone, it's not sending the signal to the bones to grow larger, and a person doesn't grow to a normal height. Okay. So, for example, a person that has this disorder would not be an average height for a person. It can be treated if it's caught early. It can sometimes be treated with human growth hormone supplements, where they give a person artificial human growth hormone to help them reach a more normal height. The opposite can also happen. In some people, their pituitary gland produces too much growth hormone. And what do you think happens? Right. Sometimes it's because of a tumor on the pituitary gland, and it just produces too much growth hormone, and a person grows to an abnormally large height. You guys recognize this person? Probably not. Who is it? Yeah, it's Andre the Giant. Yeah, there's a great documentary about Andre the Giant. But yeah, you guys know Obey the brand? That's Andre the Giant. But yeah, Andre the Giant had hyperpituitarism. His body was producing excess human growth hormone. He grew to a height over 7 feet tall and weighed 500 and something pounds. The tallest man to ever live, actually, he had a tumor on his pituitary gland, and he never stopped growing until he died. He was in his 20s, and he was still growing taller. Yeah, Robert Wadlow. You remember that from probably watched it in 7th grade? Oh yeah, did anyone like when I was a kid? I don't know if they did this when you guys were younger. Did you ever get like the Guinness Book of World Records and like look through? I used to love those. Yeah, he's huge, huge. Yeah, he grew so tall his joints couldn't support his weight. He had to wear these like metal braces on his legs, and yeah, he got an infection from one of them, like cutting into his feet, and the infection spread to his body. That's what he died of. Yeah. There's also disorders of the adrenal gland, which produces cortisol, a stress hormone. And sometimes it can produce too much of this hormone, sometimes it can produce too little. Again, all of these because these hormones are meant to help maintain homeostasis in our bodies, when there's a disease disrupting them, then our body doesn't maintain homeostasis, and it comes with, a series of side effects. All right. Any questions about the endocrine system? This one? Oh, this is showing Cushing's disease. This is or Addison's disease. This is showing it's just a disease of the adrenal gland, and the person's gums start to turn black. Yeah, it's kind of gross. You can see the black gums there. It just happens because of this lack of disease. I don't know exactly what causes the blackness, but it's just like a characteristic of these adrenal diseases. And typically, the treatments for these, like if your body's producing too little of a hormone, it's to give you artificial hormone. Inject yourself with this hormone if possible. Or if your body's producing too much, sometimes do surgery or something to reduce the amount of that hormone. But there's a whole variety of these diseases. Any questions about that?